Hello, everyone. Thanks, Mark, for inviting me along. Yes, I'm going to talk to you about kind of two aspects of my work that have come together. The first is a little bit of history about Kinetica Museum and Connecticut Art Fair. This year is actually the 10-year anniversary since the Kinetica Museum opened in Spitalfields in East London. And it's an arts organisation that I co-founded to provide a platform for artists who are experimenting with new technologies. So it's work that's a lot of the time kinetic in that it moves and it engages people, it kind of pulls people's attention into the work, so that the viewer is kind of participating with the work. So then I'm going to give you a bit of the sort of history of that and the work that we've done with artists, with various artists who are working in this area. And then more recently, the research that I've been involved in, which is around how technology combined with the creative arts can help to make us more present in the moment, aware, self-aware, and aware of our experience, our bodily sensations, our thoughts, and so on. Hence the title is Art and Immersion, Engagement and Presence, Creativity and Technology for Improving Mindful Awareness. So this research specifically is looking at how immersive technologies might be able to enhance mindfulness training to help us feel more comfortable, present in the moment with ourselves. So if we could just advance a couple of slides, another one. This is just that's a little bit about the history of kinetic art, which kind of had a bit of a heyday in the 50s and 60s. And by launching Kinetica Museum 10 years ago, we kind of brought it back into the public imagination in some ways, bringing a lot of the contemporary work in this area together under one roof in this building, which, as I say, is in Spitalfields Market. So it was the UK's first museum dedicated to kinetic, technological, and electronic art. Yeah, just keep moving forward. We'll probably find some blank slides where video is supposed to have been, but maybe at the end I can show a bit of the video if I can kind of find it on the computer. So yeah, keep going. This is where some video should have been, so if you should keep going. So it's actually very bright in here. Can we get these images will look a bit better if there's less light shining on them. Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah. So as well as the exhibition space in Spitalfields, we also produced exhibitions and events in other spaces in kind of site-specific locations. And this was actually in a, at the time it was called the Shunt Space. It was beneath London Bridge, kind of in the vaults underneath the railway tunnels, and we did a series of installations there. This is actually a photograph. It looks like it's a digital image, or it looks like it's been photoshopped in some way. It's actually just a photograph, and it's kind of to illustrate how a lot of the work that we show is in the physical space. It's actually less about the digital, but it's more about new media, but showing that in the physical space. So hence kinetic installations, kind of physical installations. So this is actually, it actually uses a substance called electroluminescence, and it's laid across the side of this space, so it looks like it is a digital image. If you keep going through, there's a few more. So that again, this is a different technique using fiber optics. But just giving an example of the sort of different size of installations and how they do kind of engage the senses. It's very much about a multi-sensory experience to kind of bring us into, if you like, take our awareness out of our kind of head and our thinking where it is so often, and bringing it into other senses and other sensations that we feel. So yeah, if you go forward. This is where the video about Kinetic Art Fair would have been, which I'll show a bit later again. And then we did an exhibition last year at a venue called the Hospital Club in Covent Garden, all around gravity. If you keep going. This I wanted to show as an example of kind of to track how one of the artists that we work with, the evolution of how his work has progressed. Again, it kind of needs the video, but what I want to show with this is how it's an example of an artist where we've actually taken from it being an installation through to it being a performance and him performing with the work, and now. So essentially, just to explain, again, without the video, it's a bit difficult, but he creates these waves of light. And the idea is that there's all these waves around us all the time, electromagnetic waves, waves that are used for communication, waves, we have brain waves that basically are continually modulating our thinking and our interaction with each other and the energy amongst us. And these are all waves that are there, but we can't see them. They're invisible to us. But they're kind of governing our behavior and our interactions and the energy amongst us all the time. So what he's doing is, if you like, bringing those waves into our visibility so that we can see them. If you move forward a bit. Okay, well, yeah, this is an example of another piece that was in that exhibition where this was like a mini hologram, again, with this sort of wave form that changed the intensity of the wave movements, and the color changed according to the brainwave activity of the person in front of it. So it was that we had a system, EEG system, where the person's brainwaves altered the color of the so-called hologram that you can see there. It's not strictly speaking a hologram. I can talk more about that if you want, but it's an illusion of a hologram. So now we're working with Paul Friedlander to kind of introduce some of these concepts into his pieces, which are these very large-scale kind of wave installations, and then potentially having them change according to the brainwave activity of the people around them. So if you go forward, again, this is how I kind of got interested in all of this, because I did a course of neurofeedback. I don't know if anyone heard of neurofeedback. It's a means of regulating the activity in our brains, the different brain waves from alpha waves, beta waves, gamma waves, and so on, can be regulated according to certain kind of stimuli that we look at or that we hear. So in a simple example, you look at a graph that goes up and down and that is monitoring the different brain waves and the frequencies of the brain waves. And then as you look at that graph and as you see, if you're given a kind of target for your alpha brainwave, for instance, and as your brainwaves hit the target, you get some feedback, which, for instance, is a little auditory beep, and then is a bit like a kind of reward. And so there's this feedback that goes on, and the brain waves kind of modulate as a result of that. So neurofeedback is used as a means of, for instance, feeling calmer and more focused. So you can set the targets for your alpha brainwaves can be set in such a way to be kind of optimum in order to feel calm and more focused. And through doing this, I kind of realized, it kind of struck me how technology could be used to make me feel calmer, less anxious, more focused. And then I thought, well, this is great. But then I also thought, I don't really want to be connected up to this EEG headset every time I want to feel calmer, more focused, less anxious. So that's kind of how I started researching mindfulness, getting into mindfulness, read books about mindfulness, did an MBCT course, 8-week course in mindfulness. Because essentially it's the same thing. You're doing the same thing. You're having this sort of sense of agency and control or observation over the thoughts and ultimately the brainwave activity that's going on. So yeah, if you advance to the next slide. And this is through doing the neurofeedback. There's an author called Les Femi. He wrote this book called The Open Focus Brain, and he sort of drew this map of attention. And what he said is that in particularly the kind of current technological society that we live in, we're in this state of what he called narrow objective focus, which is this very, very sort of overly narrow, constricted view, if you like, or kind of state where we're kind of just doing, going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, without this kind of wider, what he calls open focus, that you get more from this more diffuse, immersive side of attention. But he said that the optimum is this open focus, which is like in the middle of this cross, where you're kind of got this flexibility. Sometimes you need to be narrowly focused and narrow objective, kind of drilling down on a particular detail. But what he says, we're in that state too much of the time. So if you flick the next slide, and I'm sorry, the connection with neurofeedback is because he did these various tests showing how in meditation he was able to reach these kind of what he called synchronous alpha states by not focusing on an object of attention necessarily, but on the space around it. So rather than this narrow objective view, this more kind of what he called open focus, produced these what he calls synchronous alpha brainwave states. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is kind of what he said, that we're in this sort of hyper-focused attention state a lot of the time, and this is what leads to stress, anxiety, and these kind of damaging mental health, psychological, but also physical conditions. Next slide. So as I say, this is kind of what got me into mindfulness. There's many definitions of mindfulness. This is probably one of the best known, by John Kabat-Zinn. He defined it as an awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose, which is about the intention in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So that's noticing when your attention has wandered, and non-judgmentally bringing it back to the object of your attention. If we keep moving forward, by the way, how much longer do you want me to speak for? Okay. Oh, we're on here now, are we? I think that again, I'll try and leave 5 minutes maybe to show a few of the videos when I get on the back. So this research by Les Femi was kind of in the back of my mind when I got involved in this project called Photography, which came about from some artists who had exhibited at one of the Kinetica art fairs, and they did this research into this new form of visual perspective that brings in our peripheral vision, the peripheral information that's so often excluded from traditional imaging, which uses something called linear perspective. And linear perspective works quite well when you only have that limited view of about sort of 30% of what we see. But as soon as you bring in the full peripheral, and we actually see our peripheral vision, and we actually see almost behind us. So it's almost more than 180 degrees. But once you bring that peripheral information in, linear perspective doesn't work very well because it's kind of actually curved. We don't realize it because our brain is just telling us that everything is as it should be, as it were. But actually, there's this kind of curved geometry of our peripheral vision so that basically our brain can cram as much in as possible. So photography aims to replicate the way that the human visual system works, including the fact that our vision is binocular, and replicate it in a way that, as I say, traditional imaging doesn't. So if you move forward again. Oh, that's interesting. What was that? Go back. Oh, I see. It's just saying there's a video there and it can't play it. Okay, go forward. So this just compares the difference between linear perspective and photography. Linear perspective is essentially a conventional photograph. The camera lens, the artists 500 years ago invented this perspective called linear perspective. Renaissance artists realized this was a way of being able to portray the world that enabled them to include as much visual information as possible, but it doesn't actually accurately portray what's there if you were there. And one of the key things is this peripheral information, as I say, and then in the photography, our peripheral vision most of the time includes us having our sense of our bodies. We see ourselves when we see other people. But that's always just excluded from imaging in traditional imaging. So there you can see how the body's included in the photographic image, and that gives this sense of first-person perspective, this sense of a kind of empathetic view of being there or being in that person's shoes. So yeah, go forward. I'll skip this. This is just some tests that we did to show that photography means that our attention is drawn to this kind of region of interest to a certain point. And then a lot of what we're doing, a lot of these tests that we're doing now is comparing photography with other immersive technologies that aim to draw you into a particular perspective, in particular virtual reality. So the advantage of photography is that you don't have to wear any particular kind of headset or helmet, or you're not confined within a solitary experience. It's very much a kind of shared immersion. Yeah, if you go forward. So yes, as I say, comparing to virtual reality, where you're very much... Virtual reality is certainly very, very immersive. You are being drawn into another world, taken into someone else's perspective, another space. But that's not always what the intention is. And sometimes, and certainly in terms of mindfulness, the aim is to actually make people aware of themselves, their own experience, their bodies, and so on. So being locked away in a virtual world is not so effective for that. Next slide. See what's there. So this is showing some of the research and work that's going on with virtual reality. How virtual reality is good, where that is the aim to take someone to another world, and in this case, it's used as a kind of exposure therapy. For instance, in treating phobias such as a fear of heights. One way of doing that is exposure. So you under controlled circumstances, you expose people to the thing that they fear. Now, it's quite difficult to do that, taking someone up to the top of a building in a physical sense. But in virtual reality, you can mimic that, and the bodily sensations that you get are actually pretty much the same, whether they're in the virtual world or the physical world. So, as I say, in a controlled environment with a therapist and so on, virtual reality can be very effective for that kind of thing. But it does have a lot of drawbacks. Some people can't do it. They don't like that confinement. There's issues sometimes with cyber sickness. People don't feel well after it. And this fact of the geometry of the perspective and the way that what's being portrayed is actually not natural. It's not perceptually natural. It's not really replicating the actual way that we see. This is what I'm looking at in my research, is how we can improve that, and how we can create similar treatments, but with more natural, immersive technologies. Okay. I think an important aspect as well is this shared immersion, through the fact that you don't have to wear this kind of helmet that isolates you, and there is this real importance of kind of shared contact, of social engagement, as something that's kind of innate in all of us. We have this desire to connect. We're social animals, and so often technology, although ultimately the aim is that it is connecting us through social media and so on, a lot of the time it's having the reverse effect, and we're actually isolated, and we're not really genuinely connecting body to body, face to face with each other. So I'm very much interested in ways that technology can do that, can make us more present, physically present, and less distracted. Okay, I think that's probably all I'll say, but I can show some video material if I go back there, and be really happy to maybe answer any questions, or particularly how this all relates, of course, to cultural diplomacy and to the Commonwealth and so on. I think it's just in how I've just sort of described in terms of this social connection, and how kind of almost like a sort of moving from a society that's all about doing to one that's more about just being, us being more kind of aware of our, more self-aware, aware of our kind of physical sensations, aware, a kind of a new kind of consciousness, if you like, that's more mindful.
Great. Well, first of all, let's express our sincere gratitude to Tony. Thank you so much.